Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, the mobile university for entrepreneurs. This is the go-to business podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Will. And today's guest is Casey Watts. And you know how we do, we get together with educators, entrepreneurs, content creators, and the like, and we talk about how you can take the skills you have learned in the classroom to make that impact and the income. So for those who be listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, Spotify, and Audible, Casey, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be here on the show. Thank you for having me, first and foremost. And I am Casey Watts. I am a speaker, author, and consultant who really focuses on how to help leaders gain clarity and create clarity for their people so they can hold people accountable without micromanaging, all the while empowering their people and creating dream teams on purpose, people that can move the needle and not get stuck in the hamster wheel. So that's what I do. And I do that all through, like I said, speaking. I do that through consulting and coaching. And of course, through my book that's titled The Craft of Clarity. The subtitle is 6 Steps to Bridge Gaps, Foster Commitment, and Create Sustainable Alignment. So that's a little bit about who I am in a very small nutshell.
All right. So I'm always curious as to how people got to where they are. What did you think you'd be doing when you were growing up? And what is your EDU story?
Oh, man, I'm one of those people that I thought growing up, I had so many different high achieving dreams of things that I would do when I got older. So I went through a phase of wanting to be a journalist, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. It just sounded cool. And then I went through a phase of I'm going to go into music and music is going to be my full-time gig. And I even went to a university and pursued music for about a semester and realized, wow, this is really intense and not for people who enjoy music as a hobby, which is who I was. And I didn't want the joy of music to be sucked out of me. So I ended up transitioning to psychology, as a lot of people do when they don't know what major they want to pursue. And I am one of those people also who fought becoming an educator. So I said for the longest time, I will never be a teacher. I don't like kids. I'm not going to be a mom until I'm like 30. I will never drive a minivan or be that soccer mom. I have done every one of those things that I said I would never do. And it takes my mom everything not to say I told you so, who is also an educator. And so I knew, there was some part of me that knew that that really probably was going to be a part of my path. And I was just fighting it for whatever reason. And then my first year of teaching, so I ended up getting an education degree, went into my first year of teaching. It was horrific. I was that teacher that found themselves in the bathroom, in the hallway, on the floor, crying, not wanting to go back into their classroom. And lo and behold, I tried to find other jobs and I couldn't find any that suited me. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to have to go back into the classroom again. At least I know what I'm getting myself into. And that second year of teaching it's where it's at. It was like a game changer for me. It changed everything. And I kind of became addicted to learning about students and education. That was all it took. And then I spent about 15 years in the classroom as a teacher.
So what was the turning point when you realized that you could turn your expertise in leadership and coaching and turn that into a thriving business? How did you navigate the mind shift from educator to entrepreneur?
Such a great question. And I think it can be hard for people to pinpoint that, but I didn't know until someone told me, "Hey, this is something you might think about doing." I had a fantastic mentor when I was into my probably sixth, seventh, or eighth year of teaching. I had a mentor who was a professor at the college in our town who came into my classroom regularly, and she would say to me, my goodness, you don't understand that what you're doing, not very many people know how to do naturally. And you're just doing it on a regular basis. You could teach people how to do this. And I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, I'm leading PD at my school and I'm collaborating with other teachers. And most of us on this campus are doing the things that I'm doing in my classroom. So I just didn't know what was happening outside of my little bubble. And she ended up referring me to a school district that she had been working with as a consultant and said, this is the person you need to bring in. She's doing this on a day-to-day basis with her students and can teach her teachers how to do this. And I mean, she took me through the whole process. I was like, I don't even know how much to charge. She told me everything to say when I got on a phone call with the principal of these campuses, and she told me how much to charge. She told me like what all the things that I needed to create, like a quote. I didn't know. I was just like trying to Google, like, how do you create a quote? And I learned through the mistakes, but it wasn't until someone said to me, hey, this is something you really could turn into a side hustle or even a full-time gig. It wasn't until then that I really started thinking about it. So that was the turning point for me. And then, after your first gig as a consultant, especially if it goes really well, it's like, this is what I'm meant to do. It's invigorating. And so it took off from there. That school that I was working with referred me to other schools in their district. And so I got lots of different gigs there. But, you asked about the mindset shift. It really is, as a classroom teacher, especially, you are so focused on helping, helping, helping that when you shift into a business mindset, you have to really think about, yes, how do I provide value and help, while also being super mindful that I am charging what I'm worth and what my value provided is worth. And that's a hard transition, I think, for a lot of educators.
When you just said something about when you do your first job, you're like, wow. It made me think, like, it's like being an aunt or an uncle. You have a great time and you take them home. And you don't have to deal with the day to day. You don't have to deal with the other stuff. It's like, it's fun time. We have a great time, and hey, you go. And to me, it's like that's the best way to explain sort of the high of consulting. Of you go in, you have a great time with people, but that day to day, that drama, all of the things that you would see when you're in the thick of being with a school district, that does
Yeah,
not come across your
right.
desk.
Yeah. And, that's part of the reason. So I've been in like a district full time while doing consulting on the side for 7 years. And it just gets to a point where you can only make so much impact in your own campus or district or town. And it gets to a point where I'm like, I'm seeing the same issues again and again. And I'm only able to do so much. But you're right. As a consultant, I go in and I can even tell you the really hard truths that I can't necessarily say to the people that I work super closely with within my own district or campus. I can say those things because people are paying me to say those things to them. They need to know those hard truths, and I can follow up and try to hold them accountable, but it's really up to them. Like when I walk away, it's up to them to do the nitty-gritty hard work.
So you've built a brand around the idea that clarity precedes capacity. How did you gain clarity on your own business model, your mission, and your MVP when you first started?
Oh my goodness, what a process. What a process. I feel like it took me, and it's not like this for everyone. I want to make sure that I say that, not to scare people away, but it takes some people not very long to decide, oh my gosh, this is what I provide, and this is my signature offer, and all of that. But it took me a long time to get there. I found that I just had to go through this trial and experimentation, and I still do a little bit of that, but my message is super honed now. My audience is very honed. But, I started with focusing on teachers and literacy instruction. So that's what my focus was. for a long time. Well, then as my position shifted, I came out of the classroom and went into instructional leadership. I started to notice the issues, if you will, in instructional leadership. Well, then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to transition my business to focus on instructional leadership. And I think those things will happen. Inevitably, as you grow and change, your business grows and changes. But there is a through line in all of it, and that is clarity. So as I was looking back at, even today, I was kind of reviewing the questions that you sent me ahead of time, and I was looking back at my time in my own classroom, my time in instructional leadership, my time beginning consulting with teachers. Like every time, what I was focusing on was clarity. Like, how are we gaining clarity and how are we creating clarity for other people? And you just start to notice over time, like what you keep coming back to again and again, and what your expertise is. And then you are able to build models and frameworks with this constant through line. Mine happens to be clarity, but it took me a while to figure that out.
So when you launched your company, what foundational business decisions that you make that are still serving you today?
The one that I keep coming back to again and again is the power of networking and referrals. So when I think about my business, most of my business has come through referrals and networking. And so that's something I'm not willing to let go of. It's a priority every week. Almost every day, I'm setting aside time in some way to network or go through the referral system, a pattern. I typically follow a referral system for myself. I found one that works for me. And so I'm doing that all the time. But so that's really more of like, how am I gaining clients? What's the business decision I'm going to make there? But on a more, I'm going to say, practical, tangible level, a decision I had to make early on is having systems in place that allow me to stay on track and know my goals and reach toward my goals, because it can be so easy as an entrepreneur coming out of education to just kind of be all over the place. And so systems have been a core piece of my business from the beginning, really.
Let's stick right there. For example, and I want you to dive a little deeper, because normally, for those of us who do the work that we do, we are all familiar with having a job where we are doing several things at one time. And some things may not even be officially in the job description, but somehow it fell into our lap and we're doing it. But when you become that entrepreneur, you have to have these streamlined systems in place so that not only do you have time management in place, but other things in terms of how is your money coming in? Are your
Yeah.
invoices getting paid? Or is this happening in terms of bookkeeping and X, Y, and Z? There's so many things that have to happen so that you don't get caught off guard. You don't get caught up and you're like, oh, what is happening? Especially if this is something that you have started while you are working full time.
Yep.
So let's start there. When you are talking about your systems, what systems are you talking about? And how did you learn about these systems when you were first starting out?
That's one of the things, being a teacher and someone in education, you have your organization systems anyway. So a lot of that you can pull into your business. For me, it just became a lot more digital. And I think, we live in a digital world anyway. And so a lot of educators are using like their Google platforms or your folders within folders and your drives and your Google Calendar and all of that. And that's what I stuck with coming out of into consulting. I rely so heavily on my calendar and I pair it with other things. So especially like I'm familiar with Google, and I think Microsoft you can do this too, but with Google, you can pair your calendar and your Google Keep Notes and your tasks and your emails. Like it all can interact together. And it's really important, or it was for me, to learn how to pair all of those things so I could be as efficient as possible. So I have, like I said, my Google Calendar is what I live by. I do a lot of time blocking every day so I can maintain a schedule and know like what are my priorities. I typically follow a 1, 2, 3 priority list. So the one main priority for the day, two maintenance things that I want to try to get to, and three just typical tasks that I would complete on a day-to-day basis anyway. So I try to follow that kind of system within my calendar. But then, like you said, I've got spreadsheets for my quotes, my invoices, a CRM where I'm tracking my clients, and I'm thinking about how I'm not just working with these clients right now, but how am I continuing to loop back to the clients I've had in the past and just keep that connection with them. Those are probably the main systems that I put in place that have been the most helpful and consistent. And I tried to make a commitment to myself early on that I wasn't going to pay for anything that I didn't have to pay for. So that requires me to spend a little bit more time and effort in some things in the beginning. But once you have a system down, you've got a system down. And I'm not going to spend money that I'm not making.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Coaching and leadership transformation can sometimes become abstract to clients that you are working with. How did you design your services so that they clearly communicate the value and outcomes to the schools and the leaders you work with?
It is all about asking the questions and listening. And that took me a while to figure out. Like, I think for especially entrepreneurs who are consultants or authors, we tend to be more like thought leaders. And as thought leaders, sometimes our thoughts can be really high level, not with the intention of it being high level, but we're thinking high level. We know the solution, but we're not addressing the problem. And the people are speaking about the problems. They are not drawn to our solution because we're not talking about the problem that the solution solves. And the only way to know the problem and to be able to speak the language of the problem is to ask the questions and then listen intently. So you are collecting and then you are speaking to potential clients through stories. And that's the way that you're going to build those connections, hit their pain points, and help them to see maybe this person has something that's going to solve the problem that I have.
I love that. I love that. I think you're going to get to this on this next question. I'm going to hold this. I'm going to hold this to myself. When you said something, I was like, "Oh, this is so good." I'm going to hold this because I think I think when you talk about your clarity framework, you're going to touch on that. So I'm going to hold it to myself. So you emphasize the importance of self-awareness in leadership. How can leaders cultivate these qualities to inspire and lead more effectively?
That's a great question. When I'm working with leaders, one of the things that I focus on is clarity of identity. And I work with leaders or leadership teams to hone their leadership skills. And one of the things that we focus on when we're looking at their identity is what is it that, or how have I gone about doing a self assessment? How have I taken a moment to just reflect on who I am and why I am the way that I am? That's a huge self-awareness piece that has to be developed if we are going to pour into other people. And the easiest way to start doing that is to just take a personality assessment. I know a lot of people hear that and it sounds a little bit kitschy, but it's a start, right? It's not the end all be all. It doesn't inform who you're going to be because you decide that, but it can help you to kind of self-reflect and see, this is why I typically respond this way in this situation. And here's what I want to do maybe instead, or here's how I want to tweak that for the future. It also can help you to really understand the people around you because while you can't assess other people, you can understand or start to see some different habits and tendencies of people and know how to interact with them appropriately. And then, so after you've kind of taken a self audit, what are your core values? Like, I do that as a leader myself, but I do that in my business as well. Anchor to those core values as an instructional leader, and then pay attention to how people are responding to how you are living out those core values. And you know what? Ask feedback from your Square Squad. Brene Brown talks a lot about this, creating like a 1 inch by 1 inch sheet of paper where you put the names of people you respect and whose opinions you value, and you reach out to them asking, hey, how do you perceive me? What is feedback that I might need to know in order to help lead our people?
Mm. So your clarity cycle framework is a signature part of your work. At what point did you realize that you had the potential to scale it beyond a one-to-one coaching part to make it a cornerstone of your business?
When I started working with a district as an instructional leadership, or in instructional leadership. So I was the instructional specialist at a district level. And so that meant I worked with teachers and I worked with campus administrators. And a lot of that time was spent just trying to bridge the gap between the adults on the campuses. I started implementing some different things that I had probably pulled from my experience as a master classroom teacher, that I had pulled from my experience in instructional leadership at other campuses. And when I started implementing those things and I started to notice that they were working, it's so interesting. I had a teacher come to me who was she was getting certified as a principal. And she said to me, hey, how have you gone about getting everybody on the same page? Like, how did you do that? And I found myself just sitting there thinking about it, like, and I said, well, I mean, I just kind of, thought about the end goal, cast the vision, and scripted the critical moves. And she was like, yeah, but that doesn't tell me exactly how. Like, I want to know all of the steps. And so it got me thinking about the steps that I had taken to get people aligned to help leaders gain clarity and create clarity for their people. And I started presenting about it at conferences. And that turned into people wanting to know exactly what that looked like. And so I landed my first client working through the Clarity Cycle framework. I really didn't know exactly how it was going to work out. And let me tell you what, it was like this beautiful unfolding of a picture I'd painted in my mind. And now it was coming to fruition. And that just sparked several other people wanting to know about the Clarity Cycle framework. So that turned into a mastermind that I created. And then it turned into more on-campus clients. And so, I don't know that there was one point where I was like, yeah, this is it. It just kind of became it.
Wow. So now that people are listening to this and they're like, ooh, tell them, what is the clarity cycle framework?
Yeah. The Clarity Cycle framework is a 6-step framework that I take leaders through to gain clarity for themselves and create clarity for their people. And when we look at the Clarity Cycle framework, it is 6 steps, but really when you're going through the 6 steps, we're looking at them as habits of leadership. So we start with developing the habit of determining an area of focus. Then we build the habit of setting goals from that area of focus. Then we develop the habit of gaining insight from stakeholders and think about what that looks like. And then we develop the habit of casting vision and scripting critical moves. And then the last 2 steps, this first one is to really understand how to intentionally provide feedback and celebrate systematically. And then finally, our last step is how do we calibrate and sustain progress? So they're all habits that we're developing to become clarity-driven leaders.
And how do you work with people in implementing this when their culture is off? Because there is a very famous quote by Peter Drucker that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We all know there's a lot of school districts that have these beautiful mission statements that are on posters everywhere, and they make these pronouncements of what they want to do and what they want to be, and businesses do the same. And they don't do anything. They also bring in consultants. And guess what? Nothing ever changes because the culture won't allow it to change because their culture keeps them in the same loop that they're in. So
Yeah.
when you're working with a school district and you are there and you are seeing, okay, you have an issue with your culture that is going to hinder you from being able to implement this effectively, how do you approach that conversation?
Whew, it's a really tough one. And it can be uncomfortable, but sometimes that's the beauty again of being a consultant is I get to have those hard conversations. And I'm the right person to have that conversation because I'm an outsider looking in. And when I take people through the clarity cycle framework, a lot of the time so the leaders will determine an area of focus. Typically it's something like we have too many students in tiers 2 and 3, and we know that we have to improve tier 1 instruction, otherwise nothing's ever going to change. So that's our area of focus. Well, when I go on campus and I go through listening tours with the staff, I often get to hear some things that would never be said to leaders. And that causes us to shift our focus. So I might go back to leaders after going through listening tours and say, we're going to push pause and we're going to really reflect on what the culture is looking like. Because, like you said, if the culture is not where it needs to be, we're not going to make progress. And then sometimes we can shift our area of focus to where just the instructional leadership staff or one instructional leadership member, which is typically like the principal, but we will go through a clarity cycle framework just on culture of the campus and think what are the steps we have to take in order to improve the culture. Now, that doesn't always work out that way, right? So it could be that I say it would benefit you as a principal or whoever it is to go through some coaching additionally after this. So I will often provide virtual coaching sessions afterwards. And then sometimes it's like, hey, your campus isn't making progress with this. I think it might be time for us to part ways. And that's okay. As a consultant, you have to be ready to say no to certain people.
So how do you personally and professionally check in with yourself and your business? And what signs tell you that it's time to pivot and refine your offers, or it's time to maybe move forward and push in this direction?
My go-to strategy for really taking my self-audit for my business is regularly visiting a strategic roadmap that I've created. It's usually, I started this I think my very first strategic roadmap was 2022 maybe. And so every year I'm going back to that roadmap and I'm looking at my vision, my mission, my core values. I'm looking at the goals that I have. What is my content? Who is my target audience? What are my taglines? And I'm also looking at the numbers and seeing what the numbers are showing me. And that's one thing, that's another system that has to be in place because you've got to look at those numbers and see what story they're telling. And then you have to be ready to shift based on what you're just seeing. And I'm going to say this, social media. What are you seeing in social media? Because it tells a lot. And your current clients tell you a lot too. So if you're not noticing as much engagement in certain things, either you need to shift the way that you're talking about your product and the problem that it solves, or you need to shift your product or your service and it doesn't have to be a lot. As you know, it can be a 1-degree shift. But if you are keeping systems in place and really tracking your business along the way against the goals that you've set and the engagement that you're getting, it's going to unveil so much for you. And I think this is going to lead into what you might ask next, but I also have a board of directors for my business. They are people that are outside of what I do. One of the people on my board of directors is an educator. The others are not. And I take them through my strategic roadmap and they ask me the hard questions. They ask me questions as business people, and that helps me to gain clarity about what I offer and who I serve, and it helps me to make adjustments as necessary.
So you've partnered with other thought leaders. What do you look for in a strategic collaboration, and how have those relationships helped you grow your business?
Oh my gosh, if you gain nothing else from this episode, please hear me. You need people to collaborate with. You need strategic partners. It has been the most impactful thing that I have done as an entrepreneur is figuring out who I can reach out to that's going to understand the language that I'm speaking. They're kind of in the thick of it, but then also reaching out to people who have gone before me and they know where I'm headed and they know the mistakes that they've made that they can speak truth into me so that I'm not making the same mistakes. So I look for people who are on level, on par with me, and then those who are ahead of me. And sometimes I look for those people who don't have as much experience because as I'm talking with them and coaching them through things, I actually end up coaching myself. Like I'm learning, my gosh, I'm telling you to do these things, but am I doing these things? So I look for people who, above all, value collaboration over competition because there's not room for competition in becoming an entrepreneur. There's just not. It makes it too difficult for you to succeed if you are being competitive. Instead, be collaborative because you know what? If you are collaborating with people, even if they have the same services as you, you're a different person and you can refer and be referred because not everyone is for everyone. You are not for everyone, and that's okay. So that's what I would say is just find people who value collaboration over competition.
Hmm. So everyone needs to create content to build brand awareness, to get their name out there in the streets, to be able to connect with their audience, potential clients, and such. I mean, even Apple, if you go to YouTube, Apple has a YouTube channel that features different products where people are creating content, different things with Apple devices, along with other things that Apple may say, hey, you have this iPhone. Let me tell you about this, and this feature. You have a podcast. What made you decide to create a podcast over, let's say, going all in on creating a blog or doing a talking head vlog or going to TPT and creating these consumables like some of us do and sharing those freebies out? What was the genesis of that? How did all that come about?
I started a long time ago doing, not a long time ago, I say that, but it was probably been 3, 4 years. I started doing live sessions where didn't necessarily have people register for the sessions, but I had them just, you know, it's like in a Facebook Live, I think is what it was. And so I would invite people to attend and I would have people show up and they were like, "Man, you've got a lot of great content. Like you're telling us things that I can actually apply." And it was kind of invigorating to have people in the comments showing up and hearing what they had to share. And I just thought, okay, well, maybe I could do this more regularly. So I did more lives regularly. And then on Facebook Live, your live goes away after 30 days. And so it was no longer there. And I knew I wanted my content to be consistent and something that didn't go away and could be in multiple places. Enter podcasts. Now, podcasts for me, it's been one of my favorite things to do, but I've sustained it because I know that my potential clients are probably people who listen to podcasts. I know that my potential clients are going to get to know me through the podcast. And I also know that I'm making connection after connection after connection through the guests that I have on my podcast. So it's super fun. I enjoy it so much, but it's also really strategic, And so I think the genesis just was, why am I doing this? And how can I keep it on record for a longer period of time than just 30 days? And what is easy for me? And it is typically pretty easy for me to do podcasting. Blogging, That takes way too much tenacity for me to sit down and write something every single week. But I can get on here and talk to you. I mean, you can see I could talk to whoever and forever, probably. And so it just was a natural thing that I was like, yeah, we're doing this and we're going to sustain it.
And what made you decide to go with a live show? You know, catching up with Casey could have been just a podcast where you pre-record and you go back and make these edits and you put these on these different repositories. And I know you spoke earlier that you had this experience with going live, but when you decided to say, hey, I'm going to make this a podcast, you kept with that format. So why continue to go live versus, I guess, a traditional podcast in terms of I'm going to pre-record, maybe batch pre-record, and then edit these podcasts?
The thing I love about going live, well, there are so many things I like about going live, but I don't really have the capacity to edit my podcast. I have way too much going on, and it does take, like I said, a lot of tenacity to do that. And I don't necessarily want to pay someone to do that either, because I want to have full control over my content. And going live means that whatever is live is staying on YouTube and staying on LinkedIn. Like, you cannot delete things from LinkedIn. I don't know if you knew that, but if you go live on LinkedIn, it stays on LinkedIn. You can't delete it. And YouTube, of course, you can delete videos, but I think the thing I like about it is it's on the spot. There's an audience. Like, there's almost always the potential for an audience to be there. There's the ability for them to comment live and I can address the comments. And I think there's just that connection piece that I love about potentially having people in the audience who can interact. And there, I don't know, there's something about going live too that feels more authentic to me. I don't know. I can't quite pinpoint, but I think for me it just feels a lot more authentic. And like I said, I don't have the capacity to edit, but going live too means that people can join immediately. Like, I can say, hey, I'm going live tonight. Come join us. Or I can send out an invite to people and do a mass email like, hey, would love to have you all join the show tonight. And guess what? If I'm getting more comments on YouTube or LinkedIn, the more people are seeing it. And that's the other thing too. I want people to be able to see me as I'm talking to them. So those are just several reasons that I choose to do my podcast live and then upload it to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those places.
So before we go, and Casey's been awesome hanging out with you. Hopefully folks will know this by the time this airs. I was a guest on your show, so it was great to have you come on mine. Before we go, how do you approach professional development as a business owner? And what has been the greatest investment for your ROI for your business? And how has it improved your own leadership?
Mm-hmm. You know, we talked about this earlier a little bit, but I definitely have my fellow entrepreneurs that I'm working with on a regular basis and learning from each other, sharing the tips, tricks, and all of the mistakes that we make so that we don't make those mistakes moving forward. But that's a huge, huge piece of it. I feel like my network is really, really large at this point, and I'm so grateful for that because I know who I can reach out to when I want to know more about either content that I'm not familiar with in the education space, or if I want to know about business strategies. So that's one way that I choose to invest professionally and learn. But I also continue to attend conferences as much as I can. And I intentionally listen to what people are presenting and how the participants are interacting and responding to the content being presented. That's super helpful for me as an entrepreneur and helps me to stay up to date with what's going on in the professional education world, but also what are the pain points that I might be noticing. And then finally, I believe in investing in a coach for myself or a program of some sort. So it could be a coach that I'm investing in or a program that I'm investing in, a course, literature I'm reading all the time. And it fluctuates. Like, I go through seasons where I'm like, I don't really have the finances right now to invest in a coach. So I'm going to read a book. But you're just always growing and changing.
That's all right. That is all right. Thank you, Casey, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Now, people, you know how I do this. This podcast episode is going to be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, Spotify, and Audible. I need you to subscribe and to share with your network. And though I'm on all major podcast platforms and others, I'm trying to grow an Apple Podcast. So listen, people, because they do check. All right. They check if you're really listening. So do that. Leave me some stars, leave me some reviews, because your boy's trying to be found, and I'm trying to get Oprah on the show because I want her to know that we're doing big things around here. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Casey Watts, for coming on and dropping so many gems, and for you for checking out another episode of the Dr. Will Show, the Mobile University of Entrepreneur. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.